Unlock the cells.
Okay.
Psychics are arguably the most influential humans around. They've been revered and even feared since the beginning of time. Take the Oracle of Delphi from ancient Greece, or the widely celebrated clairvoyant Nostradamus. Psychics hold a special mystique that's hard for us mere mortals to deny. The boys' world is no different. It's had its share of mind readers and psychics with varying levels of psychogenic powers. Since the first season of the Prime series, we've had supes who could get inside people's heads and even make them do awful things. While the boys' verse hasn't yet had an overarching psychic in a prominent role yet, like the incomparable Professor X of Marvel, there is a generational talent who is hot on her heels right now and could be the game changer. And not to forget the one guy who literally disabled the big bad Billy Butcher in Season 3 of The Boys. Remember that mental agent? Well, we're about to remind you as we dive in, head first, into every psychic that has made a mark in The Boys universe. But before we get into our heady details, we have a small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing. It's a small click for you, but it means a lot for us. Thank you. Let us begin with our first psychosomatic soup. 1. Mindstorm. Sure, here's the proofread version. Mindstorm, or Daniel, is introduced in the Prime series The Boys in Season 3, in Grace Mallory's recollection of Operation Charlie down in Barbary Coast, Nicaragua. While Mindstorm was arguably the strongest telepath in The Boys universe, he has one of the more tragic backstories. His story comes to light in 1984, when the U.S. Army was fighting in Nicaragua to provide support to the Contras while also smuggling drugs into the U.S. on the side. Mindstorm was part of the soup team Payback, which was sent to assist the Contras against the Russian-backed Sandinistas. Remember the time Payback turned on Soldier Boy because of his abuse and general arrogance? Well, Mindstorm was a part of that mutiny, instigated by Stan Edgar. A standoff occurred between the rest of Payback and Soldier Boy, and initially, Soldier Boy seemed to be defending his treacherous team. He had already smashed Black Noir's head when Mindstorm used his telepathic powers to distract Soldier Boy, giving Crimson Countess the opportunity to knock Soldier Boy out. While Payback was disbanded afterward and was no longer a thing at Vought, they retained Mindstorm, giving him the job of a star magician host of one of their Vegas casino shows. It worked out well for a while, but then the show got canceled when a contestant got hurt. No thanks to Mindstorm for having a careless slip-up with his powers. It's actually a funny story. We'll get to it in just a minute. At some point during this casino run, Mindstorm's bipolar disorder surfaced, and he started taking lithium doses to manage it. But that did little to dampen his sensory overload. He was hearing too many voices in his brain at once, driving him up the wall. He became paranoid and isolated himself from the world at large. He lived in a cabin away from the city. He left his cabin sparingly to get prescription drugs related to his bipolar treatment, and it's on this errand that Soldier Boy, Huey, and Butcher track him down. They go into the forest where Mindstorm's cabin is located and step on a landmine, as luck would have it. Mindstorm had booby traps out there, and he was aware of their presence. He found Butcher with his guard down and used this moment to trap him in a nightmare, rendering him utterly useless as he relived his childhood trauma inside his mind. Mindstorm ran off to his cabin, but Soldier Boy and Huey followed him there. Now remember, Huey's on V right now and has a trick or two up his sleeve too. He sneaks up behind Mindstorm and teleports him back to the entranced Butcher. Huey reasons with Mindstorm, who tries to explain himself to him. Mindstorm didn't want any trouble. He was just trying his best to escape the voices in his head. Huey struck a deal with him, promising to get him to a safe place if he brought Butcher back to sanity. Mindstorm takes the spell off, and Butcher comes around. But before Huey can do anything at all, Soldier Boy attacks Mindstorm and wraps his head up with a cloth so that he can no longer use his powers. He asks Mindstorm about his betrayal in Nicaragua. Mindstorm discloses the true story. It was Vought International that had planned that whole thing. They wanted Soldier Boy to be caught by the Russians so they could replace him. Soldier Boy was ultimately replaced by Homelander, who was his own son. Shaken up by this revelation, Soldier Boy kills him with his signature execution style. That is, smashing his head up over and over with his shield. Power. Mindstorm could imprison people in dream sequences within their own minds, completely cutting them from their physical reality just by making eye contact with them. In 1986, Mindstorm came upon a meth lab on a trip to California. The motorcycle gang who owned the thing tried to kill him, but he managed to cast a spell on all 16 of them, trapping them into a series of endless nightmares as their bodies dried up into husks over time in the desert sun, unbeknownst to their conscience, and they all die. That feat alone explains the magnitude of Mindstorm's supersensory capacity. I bet if he weren't bipolar, he would have been an excellent asset for Vought in dismantling the boys' growing threat. He could mind-read anyone in a 3-mile radius without so much as touching them, but only with his superior mental concentration alone. Mindstorm also had extraordinary mind control abilities. Remember the funny story I promised you? Well, here it is. When Mindstorm was a host at the magic show in Vegas, he hypnotized one of the audience volunteers into thinking he was a Spanish bull. The guy got up and went charging into a store with red rugs on display, severely injuring himself, and he had to be hospitalized. Oopsies, right? Mindstorm was one of those rare Vought products that was way too powerful not to be a jerk, and he wasn't one. That is a rarity for a soup who once belonged to the #1 team in America. So why didn't Vought train him to be of greater use, or use him more appropriately for their benefit? Well, the days of payback are way past, and I guess we'll never know. 2. Mesmer. Mesmer, or Charles, came from the soup team Teenage Kicks, and was chummy with A-Train during their time there. He had a decent hand as far as psychic powers go, but he never got around to doing anything substantial with them. When he was young, he was the psychic star of a detective TV series called The Mesmerizer. He also got into the music scene, releasing a solo album titled Feeling Your Feelings. It's okay, feel free to laugh your butt off at that title. And don't you ever forget not to feel your feelings, you hear? Mesmer spent his youth being sort of famous. Then, one day, he decided he'd use his telepathic powers for something more profitable. I mean, dabbling in a bit of insider trading wouldn't do any harm, would it? Oh yes, it would. Take notes, good people. He was fired from Vought and convicted by the law, which did nothing to brighten that fame candle. It fizzled out on him, and he yearned for that same attention for the entirety of his short existence. His life quickly took him to a crossroads. One path led to fame, and the other to his daughter Cleo. He chose fame. He was working with the boys briefly, but decided to betray them to earn Homelander's favor, which he expected would be his one-way ticket back into Vought. But there was no escaping Butcher after that. Butcher chased him down, trapped him in a public bathroom, and smashed his face repeatedly into the sink till his body went limp and quiet. A sorry end to a sorry life. Powers. Mesmer was above all a mind reader, which almost makes up for him not getting a drop on that celebrated soup strength, which usually comes automatically with a compound V jab. Another facet of Mesmer's powers is that he needs to make physical contact with people to get into their minds. In this way, he was able to read Kimiko's mind in Season 1 to work out where she came from. Later, at the subway station, when Mesmer was driven inside the bathroom, where he found himself between Butcher and a hard place, a sink to be exact, he used his powers to look into Butcher's depressed past with his wife, Becca. He then tried to use that information to beguile Butcher into letting him live. It didn't work out too well for him though, as Butcher didn't fall for it, but at least he had to try. Mind reading in itself is a great power. It's really all the silver you'll ever need. If only Mesmer had some principles in life, or at least the intelligence to pull his shady ventures off.
Sam, go to sleep.
3. Cate Dunlap. Remember when we mentioned the hot on her heels generational psychic at the start of the video? Well, here she is. Cate Dunlap, the leader of the Soup Supreme movement in the Amazon Prime series Gen V. She's the main antagonist of The Boys spin-off, and Season 1 shows her descent into villainy. She started off as the college diva, dating the most popular Soup, the Golden Boy, and doing the regular things that college kids do. You know, dress up, party, mind control the bouncer to get into clubs, pretty harmless stuff. But slowly, she begins to unearth her deep-seated hatred for non-Soups, and the season ends with her calling for an all-out war with the people without powers. Cate Dunlap has the potent ability to make anyone do what she asks by simply touching them, and she has a disturbing childhood incident to go with it. On a camping trip with her family when she was 9, Cate got a little fed up with her annoying little brother Caleb, so she grabbed his arm and asked him to go away and never return. Cate didn't know at the time that she had the power of mind control, and how could she know? Her powers had only just kicked in. Many search parties went all over trying to find Caleb, but to no avail. He was lost forever, and Cate's parents buried her in their despair. They made her wear gloves and confined her indoors, habituating her to stay away from people as she might hurt them. Indira Shetty, the dean at Godalkin, is the one who retrieved her from the shadows and showed her how to control her powers. And she also convinced Cate to attend Godalkin U. Cate is now the predominant bad girl on Gen V and has also taken the stage in the running season of The Boys, representing the Guardians of Godalkin. That brief appearance on The Boys felt like a prelude to the ultimate showdown against non-powered people that Homelander seems to have on his bucket list, in which Gen V's base princess will surely have a part. Powers. Cate Dunlap uses touch to control people's minds. Her hands are always gloved, and when the gloves are off, she means business. She's able to mentally control people once touched, confiscating their gray matter for as long or as little as she wants. But using her powers intensely and too often exhausts her. We've seen her collapse with exhaustion after saving Andre from a bunch of guards. Her powers are potent though, and she's capable of inducing a psychic coma, completely incapacitating those she has touched. But for one of the toughest supes in Gen V, Cate Dunlap's strongest suit isn't even her powers. Instead, it's her ability to use her powers smarter than the others. While most of the kids at Godalkin U are using their gifts, owed to the Compound V swimming in their blood, more like party tricks, Cate Dunlap has used them to achieve her more significant goals since the beginning of the series. She used them to keep her late boyfriend, the Golden Boy, close to her and away from his demons, which ultimately didn't work. That was, however, not her fault, as Luke Riordan's demons were too big, what with the guilt about his schizophrenic brother, who is still stuck in the wood. It's a tall order for any girl to manage, but she tried. Later on, she reaches a point where she feels non-supes are to blame for the plight of supes. She frees the supes at the woods using her powers, coupled with Sam Riordan's super strength, and encourages them to eradicate all the non-supes. A femme fatale in the making, boys and girls. 4. Rufus. Rufus is a small-timer on the soup ladder at Godalkin, and if you're wondering, yes, he is indeed named after Roofies, the date rape pill. He seems to be milking his telepathic abilities like a living, breathing roofie caplet. He gets girls into compromising positions without their knowledge. He's gotten it in the Family Jewels a few times as an upshot of his general behavior. We'll give you a very satisfying yet revolting story on that soon. In Gen V, he's a regular, unsavory presence. The last we see of him is when Sweaty Soup, who had just been freed from the woods, asks him if he's a soup, which Rufus rudely affirms. Sweaty Soup then goes on to pose the same question to a professor, who replies that she isn't one. He grips her face, which scalds to a boil under his touch, and Rufus records the whole thing on his phone. What do you reckon he's gonna do with that piece of evidence in the forthcoming Gen V season? Powers. Rufus is a telepath, and he's got astral projection and clairvoyance on his resume. For all his psychic abilities, though, Rufus isn't aiming for anything noble. In fact, he is quite a jerk and a pervert. We see him use his powers in the series, but it's overshadowed by an outrageous display of violence that Marie Moreau inflicts upon him. To give you the real picture, Rufus finds his John Thomas blown off in episode 4 of Gen V, and I'm confident I've never seen something like this on TV. But that's what The Boys, and now the Gen V world, specializes in, finding new ways to explode gore all over our screens. Come to think of it, I've seen something of a similar blast-up in The Boys Season 3 involving Soup Termite, but we're not about to touch that crazy story today. Back to Rufus. In Gen V, Marie Moreau is trying to find Emma, her roommate and good friend, who seems to have gone missing since she went out to the woods. She asks for Rufus's help. I mean, his supersensory abilities come in somewhat handy here as he locates Emma after feeling out her tiny dress. But Rufus uses his mind-controlling powers to render Marie unconscious, and when she wakes, she's about to get sexually assaulted. She uses her blood control powers to blow up Rufus's member like a balloon and then explode it. And sure, She could have gone easy on the guy, but I'm not mad at her. The guy absolutely deserved that turn for being such a dirtbag.
I'm the first super in a hijab, aren't I? So if I can get myself into the 7, lit, man.
5. Silver Kincaid. The Silver Kincaid in the Prime series differs significantly from her version in the comics. In the Prime series, Silver Kincaid, or Grace, is a British Muslim who appears on a reality TV show called American Hero. The show is hosted by Starlight, who once commented that Silver Kincaid was the most qualified to become a member of the Seven and was also a UNICEF ambassador. But while she is known to be a telepath, we never see her use her powers in the show. But in the comics, Silver Kincaid, with her silver white hair, has a vital part to play. She was one of the original members of the soup team, the G-Men. Grace Wilhelm was abducted by John Godolkin from a small town called Cranbrook in Massachusetts when she was about 10 and her Uncle Paul had taken her out for ice cream. Godolkin injected her with Compound V and gradually institutionalized her to give her steadfast loyalty to him even after his constant abuse. Godolkin had many orphans and kidnapped children under his wing, and he made a team of soups with them. Silver Kincaid was a part of this troupe named G-Men. Godolkin was a sexual deviant. He used these kids for his sick pleasures, and they remained under his influence. Marketed as outcasts and underdogs, they found vast popularity among the masses. But Silver Kincaid had an additional role that she fulfilled for her master. She was a powerful soup and created pressure fields within people to kill them. She was masterful and efficient, and John Godolkin used her to kill the dissidents among the G-Men and other spin-off teams. Simply put, any kid who got out of line got a load of Silver Kincaid, and the end result was never pretty. For this reason, she was hated by her team. She had a friend within it, and that was Nubia. And when John Godolkin had Kincaid kill Nubia and later revive her by re-injecting her with V into a zombie-like existence, Kincaid cracked. She knew she had to end John Godolkin's evil enterprise, and she contacted the CIA. Susan Raynor, the then director of the CIA, got Kincaid to spy on Godolkin's activities and his relationship with Vought. While trying to do the right thing, she spied on Godolkin and gave information to Raynor for 3 long years. This left Silver Kincaid mentally torn, as she was also bound to her abuser and creator by a lifetime of brainwashing. When Godolkin got suspicious of her, she reached out to Raynor for help, who curtly refused the poor girl. Raynor also told her about how her real family perished with grief after losing her when she was a kid. With this disclosure, Raynor pushed Silver Kincaid off the edge. Silver Kincaid went to Cranbrook and stood on a street corner for hours, gazing into oblivion. A cop approached her about her strange behavior, and all she said was, "Where is Uncle Paul?" To the cop's great shock, she then began to bleed profusely from her facial orifices and died on the same spot. She had used her incredible powers one last time to take her own miserable life. Powers. Silver Kincaid was a telepath, and her powers were unique. She had psychic prowess and could create gravitational fields to squeeze or crush stuff with great precision. For this very reason, John Godolkin chose her as his right-hand girl and made her do all his rebellion-snuffing killings. That day, she stood in Cranbrook waiting for something, maybe a miracle, to make her the same little girl who had just gone out for some ice cream with her uncle again. She had broken down. At the officer's word, her heart precipitated into pieces, and she proceeded to bleed herself out by pressurizing her own brain. She was a special girl, but she was raised in a world of sadism. Being nothing but a puppet, she lost it all. 6. Mind-Droid. Mind-Droid is a small-time antagonist in the Boys comics and the inspiration for the Prime series character Mindstorm. Both are a part of the team Payback, but of course, the story goes a little differently in the comics. Mind-Droid is a telepath and can take a flight due to his jet-packed suit, and his life generally goes a little less traumatic than his Prime series counterpart. Mind-Droid was marketed by Vought American as a cutting-edge artificial life form, as his name suggests. The public knew him as a sentient android put together using Manbot's parts, formerly a hero robot. He was a part of the Team Payback and had an all-concealing suit with no part of him left to be seen by the common people, even at close range, except his eyes. But beneath the suit, there weren't any engineered metals, plastics, or composites. It was just another guy, although he had Compound V coursing through his veins. Crimson Countess and him were a thing for a while, even though she kept cheating on him, and he got into a word or two with a couple of guys over her, but he was never too hung up about it. His dream, like every other super next door, was the 7. Like every other soup next door was the 7. But he was not as desperate as his other teammates to join the team. He was content within Payback, except maybe this one time when they were on a mission and Tech Knight kept trying to rape him mid-flight. If you've seen our 10 murderous and psychotic teams in the boys universe, you'll remember Tech Knight suffered from sexual psychosis due to a tumor playing monkey with his brain. Tech Knight got himself kicked off the team for that one. That brain tumor also caused his death soon after. But Mind-Droid's bad times had only just taken flight with the Tech Knight incident. Payback was given the job of taking care of the boys, led by Billy Butcher, who had become a menace for Vought American, and the overconfident Payback went to work, led by Stormfront. When they met Billy Butcher, they initially seemed to have an upper hand. They boxed Billy Butcher into an abandoned house, but then everything went terribly off. Suddenly, the Crimson Countess was nowhere to be found. Butcher flung a brick into Mind-Droid's face and ran off. Mind-Droid, with the team at his tail, followed Butcher. Butcher pulled a fast one, ambushing Stormfront and taking his eye out with a shard of glass. Stormfront flew out of the scene in panic, leaving behind a flustered few, and rightly so. Swatto, Mind-Droid, and Soldier Boy were not about to take down a livid Billy Butcher. He takes them all out. Mind-Droid was tamed and left begging as Butcher stood over him with his shovel, threatening to make a kill. Mind-Droid told Butcher that he was just a dude, not a robot as popularized by Vought. He didn't detach piece by piece. He tried to reach out to Butcher's humanity, but Butcher, as usual, was running low on that virtue. He told Mind-Droid he knew he was no robot, and then proceeded to decapitate him. Mind-Droid is a telepath, but his readings aren't all that accurate. While he has some limited success with it, like translating Swatto's buzzing noise into speech so that others can understand the Fly Guy, he fails at other times, like when he tried to track Crimson Countess's whereabouts while Payback was going head-to-head with Butcher but couldn't. Also, in the same session, he could track Butcher, who had evaded them and disappeared inside the ruins of the abandoned house, by locking into his mind. But while he could detect where Butcher's mind had taken him physically, he could not read Butcher's ulterior intentions. Because of this slack, Butcher easily took the wishy-washy team apart. It's fair to say that Mind-Droid isn't a terrible person overall, but his abilities are pretty shallow. He's untrained, like most low-level soups, and he doesn't have any personal drive to groom his powers either. Marvelous verdict. While there are many who would claim the mantle of a psychic in the boys or Gen V, if we speak about the degree of powers and the unique abilities the psychics vaunt, the list narrows down considerably. With soups being known for their cavalier and often lazy and perverted attitudes, most of them never got down to honing their mental skills. The ones that are more focused and have gained a high level of mental prowess carry the load of traumatic backstories. Even so, Cate Dunlap from Gen V is worthy of the byname, and even if she is turning into quite a collegiate tyrant, she is smart enough to use her mind-bending powers rationally to make an A-line to her goals. Silver Kincaid deserves an honorable, even if she never had a chance to use her powers honorably, mention. How she manipulated gravity and created pressure with striking precision was undoubtedly quite special. But the crown of the most remarkable psychic in the boys' universe goes to Mindstorm. It isn't every day that you find a guy who can get a sweet nun, habit and all, to get down and ugly and fight his battle for him. His mind control abilities were all-encompassing, the sum total of all the psychics in the video and more. He could hypnotize any number of people into a living nightmare till the end of time without breaking a sweat. That is nigh undeniable power. I also genuinely feel bad for him. His entire story is legitimately sad, and how he met his end at Soldier Boy's hands was pretty messed up too. Anyway, that's the end of our marvelous video. Don't forget to tell us who you think reigns supreme in the psychic realm of the boys universe. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.